Hey there, Leilani here with the Magical Solution. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. And we are going to be moving forward with our book, The Medium's Book. And as most of you know, The Medium's Book is book number 2 in the series for Allan Kardec. And the first book was The Spirit's Book, and this book is The Medium's Book. You can watch previous episodes on my YouTube. If you're just joining us for the first time, this is the kind of reading that, if you are interested in psychic mediumship, if you are interested in spiritism, if you are interested in espiritismo, Caribbean spiritism, etc., etc. This is a great book. The Spirit's Book, The Medium's Book, great places to start. And so part of the reason for doing this online and reading this out loud is for people who are unable to do so for whatever the reason. Plus, it's always good to have someone there that can interpret the texts and sort of brainstorm with you and help you kind of critically think about what's being said and how it's being said. So, hopefully this helps someone out there. So we left off, this is, I believe, the third to last chapter. I want to say third or fourth to last chapter. And it is now what we call contradictions and deceptions. Hello. Oh my goodness. A lot of people showing up. Thank you. So let's get to it. Contradictions and deceptions. The opponents of Spiritism do not hesitate to point out that its adherents do not agree amongst themselves, that not all even share the same beliefs. In other words, they contradict one another. If the teaching is given by spirits, they ask, why aren't they identical? Only a serious and in-depth study of the science can expose these arguments for what they really are. We will begin by stating that these contradictions, which certain individuals make such a big noise about, are usually more apparent than real, and that they refer more to the surface than to the depth of the issue, and that is why they are of no importance. These contradictions proceed from two sources: humans and spirits. The contradictions of human origin have been sufficiently explained in the chapter Theories, number 36. And one should understand that in the beginning, while the observations were yet complete, different opinions arose about the causes and consequences of spirit phenomenon. That 3/4 of these opinions have fallen before a more serious and in-depth study. With few exceptions, and apart from certain individuals who have not easily broken from ideas they have either nourished or engendered, we can now state that there has been a unification of this vast majority of spiritists, at least as to the general principles, except perhaps for a few insignificant details. So in short, what he's really saying is there could be a room of 13 spiritists, and when you ask them what spiritism is all about and what are the general rules and what are the ethics and how do you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get 13 different answers. So just be mindful of that. Okay. To understand the cause and worth of the contradictions of spirit origin, we must identify with the nature of the invisible world by having studied all its various aspects. At first glance, it may seem strange that spirits do not all think alike, but this will come as no surprise to anyone who knows about the infinite number of degrees that they must traverse before they reach the top of the scale. To expect a single view of matters, we would have to suppose them to be all at the same level. To think that they all should see things correctly would be to believe that all had reached perfection, which has neither happened nor could happen when we remind ourselves that they are nothing more than humanity minus the corporal envelope. Since spirits of all degrees can manifest, their communication bear the stamp of their ignorance or knowledge, their moral inferiority or superiority. It is precisely for distinguishing between the true and the false, the good and the evil, that our instructions up to this point have been provided. We must remember that there are pseudo scholars and semi scholars, proud, presumptuous, and theoretical spirits, just as they are among humans. Since only pure spirits know everything for the rest, as for us, there are mysteries that they explain in their own way, according to their own ideas, and about which they can form correct or erroneous opinions. Out of vanity, they want these opinions to prevail, and they love to repeat them in their communications. The error lies in the attitude of some of their interpreters, who harshly espouse opinions that violate common sense and regard themselves as solely responsible for divulging them. Thus, the contradiction of spirit origin arises from by the natural diversity of intelligence, knowledge, ability to judge morality of certain spirits who are not yet capable of understanding and comprehending everything. Some persons might ask, what is the use of good spirits' teachings if they do not if they do not offer us a greater degree of certainty than those of humans? And the response is simple. We do not accept the teachings of all humans with the same confidence, and between two doctrines, we prefer the one whose author seems more enlightened, capable, judicious, and least subject to the passions. We must regard spirits in the same way. Even though some are not above humanity, there are many who have surpassed it, and they can provide us with information that we would seek for in vain amongst the most educated men and women. We must learn how to distinguish them from the crowd of low order spirits if we want to become enlightened. And it is this distinction that leads to an in depth understanding of Spiritism. Even this information has its limits, however. If it has not been given to the spirits to know everything, even less has it been given to humans. And therefore, there are subjects about which we would ask spirits in vain, either because they must not inform us about them or because they themselves do not understand them and can therefore only give us their own personal opinion. These personal opinions are what proud spirits state as absolute truths. It is especially regarding matters that must remain secret, such as the future and the beginning of things, which such spirits most insist on in order to give the impression that they know the secrets of God. This is also where we can find the most contradictions. So, overall, this little section really is emphasizing discernment. Discernment when you traverse the spiritual realms and you interact with spirits, you should be discerning and dissecting their behavior, their morals, their intellectual capacity, their reach for love and compassion versus, you know, being at the whim of random emotions, etc. Once you are able to do that, then you can safely move forward and learn how to become a medium better. Following are the responses given by the spirits to our questions concerning contradictions. So again, we're back to the whole interview sort of style of reading this, where Allan Kardec interviews the spirit and the spirit answers. Okay. Can the same spirit communicating at two different spiritist centers transmit contradictory opinions on the same subject? If the two centers differ as to ideas and opinions, the communication may be distorted because they are under the influence of different ranks of spirits. In that case, it is not the communication itself that is contradictory, but the way in which it is transmitted. So the spirits will not speak to you in a language that you will not understand. And so if you are coming to them through the lens of a very specific tradition, then they will communicate the divine truths through the metaphors, analogies, and symbolisms of that tradition in order for you to better understand. And so it is not that spirits are contradicting each other when one spirit speaks to multiple people and it sounds different. It's more that the lens in which they are being transmitted is different, and they're doing the best that they can with that language that they're working through. And so this is why you'll see multiple religions with the same God, or multiple texts talking about the same, event that happened in history. But because of the lenses that they are written in, you get different sides of the story, or different perspectives, if you will. We can understand that an answer may be altered, but when the character of the medium excludes any possibility of evil influence, how can high order spirits use diverse and contradictory language concerning the same subject and with individuals who are completely serious? Truly, high order spirits never contradict one another. Their language is always the same with the same individuals, but it may vary according to place and person. Therefore, note this well. Contradiction is often only apparent. It is more related to words than to ideas. Thus, upon reflection, one can see that the fundamental idea is still the same. What is more, the same spirit may respond differently concerning the same question, depending on how highly evolved the evokers are. It is not always proper for all to receive the same response, because not all are equally advanced. It would be like a child and a scholar asking you the same question. You would obviously respond to each in a way that will enable each to understand and be satisfied with the answer. In this case, even though the answers are different in form, they would have the same essential meaning, as we just discussed, right? So, why is it that when serious spirits are with certain individuals, they seem to accept ideas and even prejudices that they warn against when they are with others? We must make ourselves understood. If someone has a well established conviction about some doctrine, even if it is erroneous, we must lead them away from it, but little by little. That is why we often employ their own terms, and they seem to go along with their ideas, so that they do not suddenly take offense or stop learning from us. This is yet another reason why spiritists, espiritistas, and really good psychic mediums spend the time to learn about different world religions, because this is what allows us a larger vocabulary for our spirits to speak through. Okay. Moreover, is it not proper to sharply attack preconceptions, which would be a good way for us not to be listened to? This is why spirits often speak in terms of the opinions of those who listen to them, in order to gradually try and lead them to the truth. They adapt their language to these people as you would do if you were a skillful speaker, like knowing your audience, right? Uh, Spirits are like chameleons, in that sense. That is also why they will not speak to a Chinese person or a Muslim person in the same way they would speak to a French person or a Christian person. They would obviously be rejected. One should not see as a contradiction what it is usually only a developmental phase of truth. All spirits have their mission assigned by God, and they accomplish it according to the conditions they consider proper for benefiting those who receive their communications. So meet people where they are. Right. And that goes with anything. I mean, obviously, that's a known truth amongst spirits, but that should also be a truth amongst us as humans. You're not going to, like he said, speak to a third grader the same way you would speak to a high school student about the same subject, but yet the message of whatever is going to still be the same. So just keep that in mind, okay? So, even apparent contradictions can cast doubt in the minds of certain persons. What method should we use in order to recognize the truth? In order to discern error from truth, one must delve into the understanding of our responses by carefully and seriously meditating on them. A true study must be made of them, which requires as much time as other studies do. Study, compare, and meditate upon the issues. We have constantly affirmed that knowing the truth has its price. How could you expect to reach the truth by interpreting everything according to your own narrow minded ideas, but which you considered so great? The day is not far off, however, when the Spirit's teachings will be uniform, not only in their details, but also in their main aspects. Their mission is to destroy error, but this can only occur gradually. There are persons who have neither the time nor the ability required for a serious and in-depth study, and they accept whatever is taught to them without examining it. Wouldn't that put them at risk to believe in error? Practicing goodness and not evil is what is essential. There are not two separate doctrines for that. Goodness is always goodness, whether done in the name of Allah or Yahweh, because there is only one same God for the entire multiverse. So, how can spirits who seem to be intellectually evolved entertain obviously erroneous ideas about certain matters? Because they have their own doctrines. Those who are not very advanced, but who think they are, hold their ideas to be truth. The same thing happens amongst you. Well, what about doctrines that only accept communications from one spirit in particular, such as God or Jesus? A spirit who teaches a spirit who teaches this wants to dominate, and therefore imposes itself as the one and only. However, the unfortunate spirit who dares to assume the name of God will pay dearly for its pride. Such doctrines refute themselves because they contradict the most widely verified facts. They are unworthy of serious consideration because they lack foundation. Reason itself tells you that good proceeds from a good source and evil from an evil source. Would you expect a good tree to produce bad fruit? Have you ever picked grapes from an apple tree? The diversity of the communications is obvious proof of the diversity of their origin. In fact, spirits who want to be the only ones to communicate fail to mention why others cannot do so. Their pretentiousness is the denial of what is most beautiful and consoling about Spiritism, i.e., the relations of the visible and invisible worlds, and of men and women with their loved ones, who would otherwise be lost to them forever. These very relations are what identify men and women with their future, and which detach them from the material world. Suppressing these relations would plunge them into the torment of doubt and would feed their selfishness. If you were to examine the doctrine of these spirits, you would find unjustifiably contradictions at every step, proofs of their ignorance regarding the most obvious of things, and thus sure signs that they are little evolved. Damn, he tore that Bible a new asshole. And the spirit who that Bible is about. Sheesh. So, of all the notable contradictions in spirit communication, one of the most striking concerns reincarnation. If reincarnation is a necessity of spirit life, why don't all spirits teach it? That's a good one. Let's see what he says. Don't you realize that there are spirits whose ideas are as limited with regards to the present as there are those of many individuals on the earth? They believe that their current situation must last forever, and thus they do not look beyond the circle of their immediate perceptions, nor do they worry about where they have come from or where they're going. They are nonetheless subject to the law of necessity. Reincarnation is a necessity they do not think about while it is not happening to them at the moment. They know very well that the spirit of progress. But how? That is a conundrum for them. So, if you ask them about it, they will talk about the seven heavens superimposed on one another, like the stories of a building. That there are even some who will talk about the sphere of fire, the sphere of stars, the sphere of flowers, or the sphere of the elect. Sorry. Okay, time out. We understand that little advanced spirits cannot comprehend this issue. But why then are there spirits who are obviously little advanced, both morally and intellectually, but who spontaneously talk about their various existences and their desire to reincarnate in order to expiate their past? Things happen in spirit worlds which are difficult for you to understand. Don't you know individuals who are ignorant about certain matters but knowledgeable about others? Who have more discernment than education, and others who have more wit than discernment? Don't you also realize that spirits like to keep humans in ignorance, and to do so tout themselves as teachers, taking advantage of the ease with which their words are accepted? They seduce those who do not examine matters deeply, but when they are exposed to the light of reason, they do not keep up their charade for very long. And furthermore, you must take into account the overall prudence of the spirits in the propagation of truth. A light that is too strong and sudden is blinding, not enlightening. And thus, in certain cases, they may deem it proper to spread the truth gradually, depending on the time, place, and individuals. Moses did not teach everything that Christ would teach later, and Christ himself said many things that would only be understood by future generations. You speak of reincarnation and wonder why it has not been taught in certain countries. You must realize, however, that in a country dominated by color prejudices and with slavery deeply rooted in its customs, Spiritism would be rejected for the simple fact that it proclaims reincarnation. The idea that a master might become a slave and vice versa would appear outrageous. Wouldn't it be more worthwhile at first to accept the general idea, leaving its consequences for later? Oh, people, how short sighted you are in appreciating the designs of God. Now, then, that nothing is done without God's permission and without a purpose that you often cannot fathom. I have already told you that Spiritist beliefs will become unified. You can be certain of it. The disharmonies are already less profound and will be erased little by little as men and women become enlightened, and will disappear completely because of God's will, against which no error can prevail. Okay, well, don't the erroneous doctrines taught by certain spirits retard the progress of true science? You want everything to be problem free, but you must remember that there is no such thing as a field without weeds, which must be uprooted by the farmer. These erroneous doctrines are a result of the low order of your world. And if humans were perfect, they would accept only the truth. So errors are like fake gemstones that only a trained eye can detect. And thus, you need training to distinguish the truth from the false. Well, then, erroneous doctrines have the purpose of enabling you to separate truth from error. Well, don't those who accept error hinder their own progress? If they accept error, it is because they are not yet sufficiently advanced to comprehend truth. Bitch! Ooh! Mm. While awaiting unification, each one believes he or she possesses the sole truth, a delusion that deceptive spirits never cease to exploit. So, upon what can impartial and disinterested individuals base their judgments? The purest light can be obscured by any cloud. The flawless diamond is the most valuable. Therefore, judge spirits by the purity of their teachings. There will be unity where good has never mixed with evil. That is where humans will be connected by the very force of the circumstances, for they will realize that it is where the truth is found. Notice that the fundamental principles are the same everywhere, and they must unite you in one common thought: the love of God and the practice of goodness. No matter what path of progress is intended for souls, the final objective is the same, as well as the means to reach it: practicing goodness. There are not two different ways of doing so. If crucial differences arise regarding the very foundation of the doctrine, you have, sure, rule for appraising them. That rule is: the best doctrine is the one that best satisfies the heart and the reason, and has the most resources for leading men and women towards righteousness. I can surely tell you, this is the one which shall prevail. So now we are going to be talking about the deceptions. Up to this point, we were talking about contradictions. Now we're going to be talking about the deceptions. If being mistaken is unpleasant, it is even worse being deceived. Moreover, it is an inconvenience from which we can easily protect ourselves. The means for exposing the traps set by deceptive spirits have been set forth in previous instructions, and that is why we will say but little here regarding the matter. Following are what the spirits have said about it. Here's the question. Deceptions are one of the most disagreeable stumbling blocks of practical spiritism. Is there any way to avoid them? It seems to me that you cannot find your answer by referring to what you have already learned. Yes, there is, of course, a very simple method, which is not to ask of Spiritism anything more than what it can and must give you. Its goal is the moral perfection of humankind. As long as you hold to this, you will never be deceived, because there are not two different ways of understanding moral truth, but rather only that one which every man and woman of common sense can accept. The spirits have come to teach you and guide you along with the path of morality and not the path of fame and fortune, or to attend to your petty passions. If you never made needless requests of them or those beyond their prerogatives, none of you would open yourselves up to the deceptive spirits. Thus, we may conclude that the only one who is deceived is the one who deserves it. Ooh! Oh, shit. Man, he's getting, I will say, between the spirits book and this book, anytime he's interviewing a spirit, I swear these spirits, they hold no punches. They are not about flatteries. They are not about beating around the bush. They are not about like, shoot, they just, the spirits are not charged with teaching you about the things of this world, but with guiding you securely in what will be useful to you in the other. When they address the issues of this world, it is because they deem it necessary and not because you request it. If you see spirits as substitutes for fortune tellers and spellcasters, then you will be deceived. If all humans had to do was to address spirits in order to know everything, they would lose their free will and be outside the designs traced out by God for humankind. Humans must act on their own. God does not send spirits to make straight the path for their material life, but to prepare them for the path of the future life. So again, just to keep you guys reminded, this is being written from an evangelical Christian sort of like tearing away. Like he's still kind of fighting his shadows with regards to this. You know, you can tell throughout all of the writing that he's really fighting with himself about it because, you know, he speaks of Spiritism as a science, as a way of sort of moving away from these, you know, fanatical religious ideas. But throughout his writing, you constantly see, you know, the drippings of a lot of the tone, whether he's talking about ancient societies, whether he's talking about BIPOC societies, whether he's talking about higher or lower vibrational spirits. You always tend to see him sort of referring to all of those things as less than, and really it's a whole thing. So just keep that in mind. They're really making this be like, this is the end all be all. Spiritism is, that's it. Every religion has done that before, every single one. Anyway, there are persons who ask for nothing and are nonetheless terribly duped by spirits who manifest spontaneously without having even been evoked. What do you say to that? They ask for nothing, but they accept what such spirits say, which amounts to the same thing. If they would distrust anything outside the essential objective of spiritism, then frivolous spirits would not deceive them so easily. Why does God allow sincere individuals who trustingly accept spiritism to be deceived? Couldn't this lead them to giving up their belief? If they give up their belief for that reason, it would be because their faith was not very solid in the first place. Persons who would abandon spiritism because of a simple deception would show that they had not understood it and that they had missed its main point. God allows deception in order to test the perseverance of true adherents and to punish those who use spiritism simply as a means of entertainment. Woo-hoo-hoo. So now we are on the next chapter. What time is it? Perfect timing. We are on the next chapter, which is going to be a real juicy one. It's called Charlatanism and Trickery, Mediums for Hire and Fraudulent Manifestations. Ooh. So here's the section where a lot of evidential mediums and really fanatical Kardecians will really go hard for this idea of, if you're going to use mediums to help families connect, then you shouldn't be charging for it. Or, your services using the spirits should never be for, for hire. It all should be done out of charity, etc., etc. And of course, as we move forward, you're going to realize why that's a very, just not a practical idea at this time. So we'll get into that at a later point, but keep in mind that that's what the next chapter is going to be. And in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, now is the time. You can ask me about spiritism. You can ask me about spirits. You can ask me about what we just read in this chapter. Whatever you need at this time. I was so thirsty. It's really good. I made it. I'm listening. I'm here. Very good. I'm glad that you guys are here. That's awesome. Okay, well, if there's no questions, then I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Keep in mind that I come on here and I read for about 45 minutes every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then I reserve the last 10-15 minutes to questions and answer time. Okay, so please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week. This is how we grow.